Every single smartphone, every laptop, every server out there is a potential crime scene. But the clues, they aren't fingerprints or stray fibers. Nope, they're written in a language most of us just don't speak. A totally silent world of ones and zeros. So today, we're going to build the investigator's toolkit to decode that world and uncover what's really going on.
But what happens when the evidence itself seems, well, deceptive? What if a file that looks like a harmless family photo is actually something else entirely? That's the real mystery we're unraveling today.
So to solve that mystery, an investigator has to start at the very beginning. They have to learn the language of the evidence itself, and that language, believe it or not, is all built on numbers.
You and I, we think in decimal. We call it base 10. It's simple, right? 10 digits, 0 to 9. But that is not how computers think. They operate on a system that's way, way simpler.
This right here, this is the computer's native tongue, binary or base 2. Every single thing on your computer, your photos, your emails, this explainer you're watching, it's all just stored as a massive sequence of 2 symbols, a 0 and a 1. Each one is a bit, and when you get a group of 8 of them, that's a byte.
Okay, so trying to read millions and millions of ones and zeros would be, well, impossible, right? So investigators use a really practical shorthand, hexadecimal or base 16. It uses 16 symbols, the numbers 0 through 9 plus the letters A through F, to represent those long binary numbers in a much more compact, human-readable way.
And this chart, this is where it all clicks. Look at how they connect. See how our decimal number 10 just becomes the single letter A in hex, and 15 becomes F? This is how investigators take these massive, unreadable strings of binary code and compress them into something they can actually work with.
And here's a pro tip straight out of an investigator's playbook. You do not have to do this math in your head. The calculator that's built right into Windows has a programmer mode that can instantly flip between these systems for you. It's a simple, powerful tool they use every single day.
All right, so now that we kind of get the language, how do investigators actually use it? Let's look at how they find a file's true identity, what you might call its digital DNA.
Because here's the crucial point. You absolutely cannot trust what you see. A file extension, that little .jpg or .docx, it can be a flat-out lie. Someone can easily rename a malicious program to look like a harmless picture just to hide what it really is.
Now, this is really interesting. This is how an investigator proves it. They don't just double-click the file. No way. They open it in something called a hex editor. So this file is named sales.jpg. But look at the very first bytes, 5040K. Now over in the text view, that translates to PK. And PK isn't random. That is the unique signature, the digital DNA of a Microsoft Office file. This file isn't a picture at all. It's a document in disguise.
But a file signature, that's just the beginning. There's a whole other layer of hidden clues called metadata. And metadata is, quite literally, data about the data.
Just think of it like the file's life story. By looking at the properties of this Word document, an investigator can find clues like who created it, what company they work for, the exact name of the computer it was made on, and even the precise creation and modification dates. It's an absolute goldmine of information. Okay, but once you find a piece of evidence, how do you prove it hasn't been altered? How do you, seal the digital evidence bag? Well, that brings us to a concept known as the digital fingerprint. This is done through a process called hashing. A hash function is basically a math algorithm that takes any piece of data, a file, a photo, an entire hard drive, and spits out a unique fixed-length string of characters. And here's the magic. If even one single bit of data changes, that string, that digital fingerprint, changes completely.
So to maintain the integrity of evidence, investigators follow a very strict process. First, they create an exact copy, a forensic image of the original evidence. They never work on the original. Second, they calculate its hash value. Third, they do all their analysis on that copy. Fourth, when they're all done, they calculate the hash again. And finally, step 5, they check that the 2 hash values are identical. This proves, mathematically, that the evidence is exactly as they found it.
And again, this isn't some secret high-tech thing. It's a practical tool anyone can use. A simple command, get file hash, and Windows PowerShell can generate the digital fingerprint for any file you want, just like for this PDF. It's a fundamental step in every single digital investigation.
So we know how to identify a file and we know how to verify it. But where do we even look for this stuff? Let's explore the physical and logical places where all this evidence might be hiding.
Well, computer memory pretty much comes in 2 main flavors. First, you've got volatile memory, like RAM. It's lightning fast, but it needs power to hold on to data. The second you shut down the computer, poof, everything in it vanishes. For an investigator, capturing what's in RAM on a running computer is absolutely critical because it can hold a ton of live data, passwords, encryption keys, even open chat sessions. On the other side, you have non-volatile memory, like your hard drive. It keeps its data even when the power is off. That's your long-term storage.
This kind of gives us a map of the entire territory. An investigator has to know if they're dealing with primary storage, like that fast temporary RAM, or secondary storage, which is where all the long-term evidence is kept on things like hard drives and SSDs.
Now let's go a little deeper into one of the most interesting hiding spots there is, something called slack space. See, hard drives store data in these fixed-size blocks called clusters. But what happens when your file is smaller than the block it's being stored in?
This slide shows it perfectly. Let's say we have an 11 kilobyte file, but the cluster size on the drive is 32 kilobytes. The file only uses a part of that cluster. That leftover space, that 21 kilobytes, that's the slack space. And it's so important because it can contain fragments of old, deleted files. It's like a digital ghost. And this isn't just a theory. This is how notorious criminals get caught. The BTK killer, Dennis Rader, he was identified after investigators recovered deleted metadata from a floppy disk he sent to the media. The ghost in the machine gave him away.
But here's the thing, the digital crime scene is constantly changing. The tools and techniques that worked yesterday are being seriously challenged by the technology of today.
Investigators now face three massive hurdles. First, modern solid-state drives, or SSDs, use a command called trim that can instantly wipe deleted data for good, making recovery of things like slack space nearly impossible. Then you've got cloud computing. Evidence isn't on a single device in one room anymore. It can be scattered across servers in different countries, creating a legal and logistical nightmare. And finally, strong encryption. It's everywhere now, and it can lock data away in a digital vault that might be impossible to crack.
Which leaves us with this one last kind of haunting question. As our data becomes more and more abstract, moving to clouds we don't even control, and as our drives get smarter about erasing their own past, will digital evidence become a ghost that we can no longer catch? Will the truth just disappear?